It has been raining here for days and days and days. I have not ridden in what feels like forever, but I guess realistically it's only been about a week. I had to find something to kill the downtime, and I figured, why don't we get back to work on the cursed Navi? If you're not familiar with the Navi curse, essentially I bought the bike with a messed up clutch. We replaced that, and then somewhere down the road I also broke an exhaust stud. We fixed that, and then literally days after that I blew out a tire. So today we're swapping out the Navi tires ourselves, which I've never done. I've never swapped out motorcycle or scooter tires ever, but I figure for the cost that it would cost to take this to a shop and have it done, I could just get the tools and do it myself, even though I have zero experience. And we're gonna do it in an extremely unconventional way. But that's besides the point. I have faith, and not only are we swapping out the blown out tire, but I use this as an opportunity to get some upgraded tires that are way beefier, so we'll talk about that also. But first things first, we gotta get the rear wheel and front wheel off, so let's jump straight into it. As soon as I start filming, the sun starts coming out, but I swear you guys gotta believe me, it's soaking wet back here. I swear it's been raining for days on end. But anyway, we got everything apart, and that was actually pretty simple. So the rear wheel we just took off with the 4 17mm nuts right there. And shout out to Ride or Die. He's another YouTuber that made a video about how to do this, and before watching that, I was just gonna take this off, but this is like an 84 foot-pound torque or something like that, so I figured that this will be way easier because these are only like 30 foot-pounds or something. So I figured that taking off these 4 would be easier in the long run than taking off the one in the middle. And you can see how just decrepit and abandoned this thing looks, as always, because it seems to always be broken. There's literally like cobwebs and spider webs. The exhaust has frickin' slug trails all over it. Disgusting. But anyway, we came up to the front and that one. So those were 17mm nuts, and then the front, I think on this side was a 19 and on that side was a 14. The axle was a bit hard to break loose, but we finally got that. Once you do, the wheel will just drop down, and it has this little spacer that may or may not stay inside of the dust seal here. In our case, it came out. So when we reinstall, we'll just want to put that bigger end into the dust seal beforehand. Oh, and to even get to those axle nuts, by the way, it's just a screwdriver to take these 2 covers off, and I have no idea if the fenders need to come off to do any of this, but mine are already off, so it doesn't matter. And the tires that I got are beefy enough that we'll want the fenders off anyway in order to make them fit, so we're good there. So we do all that, and then the drum brake setup, you can see there's like a little guide right here or whatever that also has cobwebs and spider webs in it, but this guide goes up on that, so you gotta kind of slide it down, and then this whole thing just kind of shimmies out of the wheel, and we're good to go. Oh, and if you couldn't tell, I did all this on the center stand, and you could use a jack or something like that to jack it up, but you know, on the Life of Birch channel, we like to do things as just bare bones and sketchy as possible to show you guys you don't need tools to do all this stuff. So I literally just rocked it back with the handle and then slid my toolbox underneath it to keep the front wheel off the ground. All right, so the easy part is done, and now comes the time to head inside and get these tires off. Okay, welcome inside to the Life of Birch Mini Moto Garage, where we have everything that we'll need for install, and I'm sure some of this will be confusing, so let me explain. So here is the setup. Like I said, we're going absolutely bare bones, and the shovel, let's just say I didn't want to waste money on a bead breaker, so we're just gonna use a shovel. And then we got some tire irons here, some wheel protectors, some, I almost said Windex, but you know, we fancy out here, all natural Windex, and then the tires that we're gonna be going with. And of course, an air compressor. Now, any of the local shops, we're gonna want like $50 to $60 per tire to do install, which is insane to me. So instead, I went to Cycle Gear and I got this tire iron kit for 30 bucks and these wheel protectors for like 18. And then most of you guys at your house probably already have a flathead shovel and some window spray, so we're good to go there. And I did splurge on the air compressor just because I didn't have one before, but honestly, you could probably go to Wawa where they have free air and just use that instead. But I figured if I'm saving money, I might as well take that money and put it into something I can use in the long run. And these are the tires I decided to go with the Michelin City Grip 2, and they are beefy, beefy boys. So both of them are 120/70 tires. The 10 is for the rear, the 12 is for the front, and in stock form, the rear is 90/110, so we're looking at 30 millimeters wider, and the front is 90/90/12, so again, 30 millimeters wider, gonna be super beefy. Now, I went with these tires because they have super good reviews, and honestly, they were also pretty much the only thing that I could find in sizes that would work. The Navi tire sizes are super obscure, which is why lots of people decide to go with something beefier like those, but even in the beefier sizes, it was just impossible to find. So that was pretty much my only option at the time, but they also got super good reviews. Quasi-Motard himself loves them, so we should be good to go, and I'm super stoked to see how they look and perform because these things suck. Okay, so first things first, we'll start with the rear tire, the one that already has the blowout, and we'll go ahead and get this tire taken off. I don't know how easy it'll be to find, but this thing does have a pretty substantial like hole/gash in it. It's right there, and I'm sure the GoPro is really not showing it very well, but if you squeeze it, you can see got a nice big hole, and I'll put a picture in right here that shows it better. But yeah, ran over something not great, lost air very quick, and before I realized it, I went around a turn and it debeaded. So as you can see, this side of the rim is already debeaded, meaning that the tire is not seated with the rim anymore, but we still have to get the tire debeaded off of this side of the rim in order to get the tire off. Now, normally you need like a fancy debeading tool or whatever, but not today. It actually worked. Hell yeah, dude. Screw a fancy debeading tool. Literally, you just take a shovel and you sit it right by the lip of the wheel without hitting it and messing it up, and then you just step down on it as if you're digging the shovel into the dirt. Shout out to this fancy little tip that I saw about the shovel on the Team Level Up or Combo Kids, whatever they're called now, YouTube page. There are a couple of stunt riders from New Jersey, and they use this trick every time, and I would have had no idea if it weren't for them, so shout out to them. All right, so we got the rear, now we gotta get the front, but this one does have air in it still, obviously, because it didn't get blown out. So we'll take the valve stem cap off and then use something small like an Allen key to push down on that valve and drain all the air out. And now with all the air out, you know what time it is. Had to put my back into that one like I was digging into some clay, boy. Oh, the other side actually came off in that process. Let's go, baby. All right, listen, it's not that I have my doubts, but I didn't expect it to work that easily. You can see both of them just like that are debeaded. So now that that's done, we can take the tires off. Go. It was indeed not a victory. I mounted the rear tire backwards, and I'm just now realizing this at 11:30 at night, the night before this video is going live. So essentially what happened, let me explain. Okay, so this is the front tire, and typically tires have an arrow that's just the directional arrow that points in the direction that it would rotate. Well, on this, I noticed that it had an arrow that said front and an arrow that said rear. So in my head, I figured it meant the arrow that says front is the direction it would rotate going towards the front, and the arrow pointing towards the back is the direction it would rotate if it was spinning backwards. Didn't make sense to me, but it was just the most sense that I could make out of it. So I mounted the front one with the front arrow going towards the front. Then I came to the rear tire and I was like, oh, it only has a rear arrow. It doesn't have a front arrow. That's interesting. And I'm like, okay, well, same deal. The rear arrow must go to if it's spinning backwards, you know? Like I mounted the treads up the same. The rear tread is facing the same direction as the front tread. But I guess in the frustration of getting everything put on, I forgot that when I ordered the tires, for whatever reason, the front tire is available as a front and rear option. The rear tire is only supposed to be a rear tire. So what the arrows actually mean is that the front one, if you're using it as a rear, you swap it so the tread is facing a different direction. So long story short, the rear one, that little arrow means that if it's a rear tire, that this is actually the way that it rotates, meaning that I put the rear tire on backwards. Still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, the fact that whether it's a front or a rear, the treads face different directions, because the stock tires, the treads face the same directions and they're the same direction as both of these are right now. But I guess with the Michelin City Grip 2, the front and rear tread is reverse. So as much of a pain in the ass as all of this was, I guess this coming week I'll have to swap the direction of the rear tire. So don't make fun of me too bad in the comments. I feel like it's a pretty understandable mistake to make, but we don't hide our mistakes on this channel, and I'm not gonna leave you guys without a video just because I'm afraid of being embarrassed for putting a tire on in the wrong direction. But I am so upset that I have to swap it because it really was a pain in the ass. Okay, on with the entertainment. Okay, both tires are on, and honestly the 10-inch one was easier to get on than the 12, but I think it was me figuring out the technique of things more than it was anything to do with the size. So what I've realized is that you really have to keep your knee like really driven into it to keep the bead in the skinniest part of the tire, and just like really drive your knee into it and work around as you pry it. And I feel like the 3 pry bars are clutch. 2 is kind of difficult. 3 I feel like is a sweet spot, and as good of an idea as these rim protectors are, I feel like on a wheel this small, they really get in the way, because you can see once you have 2 wheel protectors or rim protectors on there, it's almost like half the size of the fucking wheel itself. So I used them as much as I could, but it seemed like for both of them on the last, like the final pry to send it home, you just could not, there was no room for the rim protector, so you had to just drive it home. I did scratch this wheel. The other one made it out scot-free. This one got a little scratch there, but fuck it, I spent $1,800 on this thing, and every bike has a bad side, and most people just don't see it because everything is low definition on the internet. Anyway, now we have to get some air in these things and seat the bead, and then we'll be good to put them back on the bike. Okay, so the idea behind the air compressor is that in order to seat the bead, you need to get air in there quick enough that it pops it out and seats the bead on the rim. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that. Oh, and we also sprayed some Windex along both sides to help it slip into place. You can hear it pop into place. And then now that it's popped into place, if you want to check to make sure there's no leaks, you can spray some more Windex around it. We're just using the hell out of it. And then check to make sure there's no bubbles coming out. And if you don't see any bubbles, that means that it's all nice and seated. It would appear that we're good on both sides. So now we can go ahead and just get the correct air pressure in both and get them mounted. This one actually already has the bead popped on, but I forgot to film that. So rear, I think stock spec is 36 PSI and front is 22. So we'll get that set and get them thrown on. We are done. Don't mind me, I'm just sitting in the rain because I'm friggin' sweating my balls off after that. And it might look like it's super duper later now, but it's actually only been 2.5 hours since we started. It's just this much darker because the rain clouds rolled back in. But I'm not complaining because it's cooling me down real nice. All right, so let's take a look at the setup now that they're on, and I'll make a couple notes about everything for you guys, and then we'll wrap things up. All right, so if we look at the front, everything's looking good. You can see it's it's pretty close to rubbing, but not actually rubbing, and it is a little bit weird. It's almost like I never noticed before that the front wheel isn't fully centered in the forks, because you got more room on that side than you do here. But either way, we're looking good, and we got clearance. Remember that you have that little thing right there that the drum brake slides into on the fork, and then the torque spec for the axle is 44 foot-pounds. So that's looking good, real nice and beefy. You can really see just how much bigger it is than stock now that it's inflated and in place, and I'm loving it. Coming around to the back, you can see we got a thick girl back here too, way bigger than the stock tire, and once again, it's way more obvious now that it's in place. Oh, now that I just rolled that, it reminded me, once you guys get everything put on, before you go for a ride, obviously spin the tires, test out the brakes before you get on the road, just to make sure that the brakes are good. We shouldn't have any issues back here, obviously, since we didn't take the drum brake setup off, but in the front we did, so of course we checked it. Now this bad boy was girthy enough that we ran into a problem that I was not expecting, which is that the tire actually couldn't fit between this like middle part and the exhaust setup. So we actually had to take all the air out of the tire so we can wedge it in there, and then afterwards put air back in the tire, and that ended up working. At first I was like, oh, am I gonna have to end up taking the middle part out anyway? We obviously could have also taken off the exhaust bracket too, but I didn't feel like doing that, and that worked out just fine. And of course, when you're putting these on, it's kind of like a car. You go like across from each other like that, you know, kind of star pattern. And the torque spec for these is 36 foot-pounds. And then over here, some people have said that their little brake thing has rubbed their tire, but you can see we have some space there. We'll obviously keep an eye on it once the tire has weight on it and actually starts spinning to make sure that nothing's rubbing. But the people who have encountered that have just kind of bent this bracket out a little bit, and it's been fine. Oh yeah, this is Future Birch checking in as I'm cleaning up, and I realized I didn't mention something that I'm sure lots of y'all will ask about. As far as mini moto tires, typically you don't have to balance them because you're not going fast enough for it to matter anyway. And these tires don't even come with the balancing dots on them. You know, they have the dots where they line up with the valve stem, whatever. So typically for wheels this small and something going that slow, balancing isn't a concern, but if we notice that there's an issue with whatever in the future, then obviously we can look into it then. Overall, I'm super satisfied with the outcome of today. You can tell the tires just look way better. They're so much beefier, and hopefully that should help with kind of some of the stability issues that people have with Navis, because the tires are just so thin and crappy. And how they actually ride is yet to be determined, but just touching them, you can tell it's a much softer and stickier compound than the stock tires. So it should be leagues, dude, I can't talk today. Leaps and bounds? Leagues better? You get it. They should be way better than stock. I can't wait to finally be able to ride and test them out, so stay tuned for that. And of course, on that ride, we'll also have to make sure that all the clearances are good, but you know, knock on wood, I think we should be okay. I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't a total pain in the ass, but given the fact that from start to finish, if I wasn't filming, it probably only would have taken an hour and a half or 2 hours, and the fact that the shop wanted to charge, I think, like $60 per tire if I brought them into them, I essentially just got paid $60 an hour to do this, minus whatever I have to buy my neighbors as an apology for all the screaming and cussing that they heard, but that's another story. Definitely not for the faint of heart, but I will say just from doing this, the further along I went, the easier it got. So if nothing else, this was a big learning experience. I now have the tools to do it in the future and the knowledge of how to do it better in the future, and that's what this is all about. Well, that's gonna do it for this one. I'm gonna go lay face down in the rain and think about all the decisions in my life that led me to this point, and yeah, shout out to the Patreon members for making all this possible. Could not be doing any of this without y'all. If you want to sign up for Patreon, it's the biggest and best way to support the channel. Just check out patreon.com/lifeofburch. You can pledge your monthly amount and get behind the scenes access, early access to videos, and much more. And you can also support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Love you guys. Peace.
Oh, so basic. Hope you play this. Damn, I prayed it. Nice song, and I became this. Oh, souls fake it. Paid those placements. Fuck shit. And I'm still waiting on the brighter days. Been a minute, been rough many times more. And I'm kicking rocks to a sky of gray. Praying hard, talk to me before I'm done for.